Hello, I'm Hannah.
I'm Luke.
And we are taking you through the last in our small group series on failure, which is about how we respond to failure. Luke, have you failed at all this week?
Oh, so many times. Yeah, well, only last night. I feel like it wasn't hard to find an example, by the way, but only last night I cooked for us, just for the two of us, nice evening meal. Hannah had done basically all of the preparation and hard work, and then was just doing her hair and just said, can you just basically finish the last bit of preparation? Partly that involved making some sort of a side dish that, now there was a recipe. I'm terrible at following instructions of any kind. So recipes are included in that. And it said, chop up some green onions and add some chili flakes and some chopped up cucumber and some sesame oil. And I was like, what are green onions? I don't know. I didn't even really think that, but what my brain thought it said, green chilies. So I added green chilies to chili flakes. And it was pretty spicy.
It was disgusting.
I quite enjoyed it, but
it was supposed to be a nice, refreshing side dish to quite a spicy Thai dish. So, yeah. But instead we had a spicy Thai dish with a very spicy.
It was a failure. It was a mistake. But I suppose I was already adjusting and going. But it's a win because it's fine. It wasn't really fine, was it?
It wasn't fine, no.
How about you?
Again, easy to find examples, but a couple of weeks ago I had a holiday all on my own, which was amazing. And as part of that, I drove to France for the day on the ferry. And I visited one town and then I wanted to go and visit another town in France. And I was following my sat nav and following the signs as I was getting on the motorway, and just ended up going in the wrong lane, and then suddenly realised I was going south instead of north. And sat nav goes, turn around in 12 kilometres. And I was like, no, 12 kilometres. And it was a toll road. So at the point where I turned around, I had to pay €5 for the privilege of driving 12 kilometres south. In the wrong direction. I was so angry with myself. And to be honest, that's partly why I wanted you involved in this conversation, because I don't think I deal with failure particularly well, and I'm really working on that at the moment, but I think you're really good at dealing with failure.
So much experience of failing, so...
But you're not really hard on yourself in the same way that I am. So what do you do? Do you just move the goalposts, or?
That's certainly how it looks like to you. Well, some of that is personality. That is for sure. And whatever personality type test you want to look at, we're pretty different.
Yeah.
So some of it is that, but some of it I think is things we can develop and work on. And I do think mistakes or failures are an opportunity to grow. I do think I have lots of them, but I've also embraced the fact that they are part of life. So we are going to mess up, we are going to fail, and how we respond to that is more interesting or is more important than whether or not we fail. And attempting to live a perfect life is just a pointless pursuit, as far as I'm concerned. So, but I think how we've been parented and how we've been raised and significant experiences, big trauma, whatever, all that stuff massively affects how we find that and whether we find it is easy. But I think it's crucial because it's a big part of the human journey. There's that quote, isn't there? I think it's C.S. Lewis, but I can't quite remember, about the human, that we think that we're on a human journey, on a way to becoming fully divine, but we're not. We're divine beings made in God's image. That doesn't mean we're God, by the way, but we're created by him. We're divine beings on a journey to becoming fully human. And I think this is part of that thing is like, it is fully human to fail. We are just always going to make mistakes, make errors, and need to adjust, need to find our way on that. So it's been really good to look at this series from it's from the book by Emma Einarsson, which is called Failure, and it's all about sin, mistakes, messing up, getting things wrong, and it's a good book to read. I'd recommend getting hold of it and having a look. There's a really good quote from this book that I like, which is, we have this is from chapter 6. It says, "We have looked failure full in the face, acknowledging that the tendency to fail is an inevitable part of being human. But here are some things that may help a person like you or me who wishes to see failure not as the end, but as the beginning of living life, and life in all its fullness." And for me, I think that is partly why I think it's exciting that we as G2 have looked at this, and we can come back to it as well. If we want to live life to the full, as Jesus says he came to bring us, life and life to the full, then we have to embrace the fact that we're going to mess up, we're going to make mistakes, get things wrong, that sat-nav re-navigation thing is a good illustration, because we're constantly needing to do that. And I think God views his discernment with us in the journey, like the Holy Spirit is more like, oh, okay, recalculating, rather than that's an impossible decision you've just made. You're now on your own, and because it wasn't in God's plan. I just think that's nonsense. But we're tempted to think that if we make some mistakes or wrong choices, we'll end up too far away. But the gospel is not that. The gospel is, it doesn't matter what you do. There's always a route back to the Father, like the prodigal son thing, or just the scriptures that would say as far as the east is from the west, that you've removed our transgressions from us. Like, it doesn't matter how much you mess up, he will remove that from us and bring us back into right relationship with him. In other words, he just says recalculating, and he's like, okay, it might take a little bit longer to re-navigate to where I was thinking of us going, but we can do that because he's in the car with us navigating.
I agree with everything you've said. Like, the theology of failure, I totally agree with, but it's definitely not my lived experience. And I think that's what I really want to work on, is like making that, I don't know if it's like a head and a heart thing or just a theology and a lived experience, but like, I'm like, oh yeah, totally, I totally agree. But that isn't how I experience failure, and I want to keep working on that and pressing into it. And the thing for me about, like, often when I read the Bible is I think I don't even know where we've got this idea that we have to succeed from, because I just don't, like, the Bible is just full of failure. Like, it's just story after story of people messing up, if that's what we say failure is. So we're like, tell us a bit more.
Well, because the picture in Eden before the fall, in the start of Genesis, they're in the perfect relationship with God, walking around in the garden and everything's really good. But then there's a fall, and clearly that's a significant moment in history. But because of the fact that we now make mistakes, we are self-oriented rather than God-oriented. The whole journey from then until Revelation, like until full restoration of the new heaven and the new earth, when Jesus comes back, it is a struggle. But it's all, I think my perspective is, it's pointless trying to live as if we are at either end of that. You can only live where you are, and we are in the in-between times when humans are going to make mistakes. But God says he sent his Son and then his Holy Spirit to be with us in it all. So he doesn't send his Spirit to remove us from the world, but that he's already overcome the world, and that he would be with us in it. I think that's the gospel. So he's in our mistakes, he's helping us navigate through them, as opposed to the goal being live a perfect life, because we know we can't do that. If we were able to live a perfect life, there'd be no need for Jesus and no need for saving, because we'd already be in perfect relationship with him. But the fact is, we do mess up. That's what sin is. Not in a kind of, well, in every sense of the word sin, it's just an imperfectness. So as a result of that, we do need Jesus. We need forgiveness. We need reconciliation. We need grace. And that's the gospel. So, but I do think it is harder for certain people to forgive themselves. But I think that is worth looking into. Why is that? And where is that voice coming from? Because I don't think it comes from God. I don't think it's not the scriptural view that we would just beat ourselves up. But often there's like a human voice, like whether it's a parent or a teacher or a friend or a particularly harsh person that you knew, and we're hearing that judgmental voice, maybe in our own internal voice, but it isn't God. It's just not what he says to us. And so I just think if you look at the whole journey of the Jewish people into captivity, out of captivity, back into exile, out of that again, throughout all the times that they mess up, even the disciples when Jesus is on earth, and the amount of times they mess up, they don't understand, they just seem to be on a different plot. But the response to those errors and mistakes is not anger and judgment and, just going, oh, you're rubbish, basically, because you made a mistake. The response is, okay, so there is a route back here, like Isaac and Esau and their whole relationship coming out as twins, and Jacob and Esau, the sons of Isaac, and they come out. They have a broken relationship the whole time. They're very different types of characters, but the whole journey of Jacob is one of being restored back to God through that difficult. So it's a recalculation and a re-navigation, and the relationship is restored towards the end of their lives. And I just think that's God's plan, is restoration. It's what he does.
Yeah.
And he can only do that when we accept that we've made a mistake.
Yeah. So I remember a few years ago, you read a different book called Black Box Thinking.
Yeah.
And there's some really good stuff in there, particularly around responding to failure.
Yeah.
So can you just tell us a bit about that?
Sure. You may have read this book, Black Box Thinking. It's really good. It's not a Christian book. It's just a book around how we respond to mistakes and failure. And I guess the basic stories or premise behind it are it looks particularly at the American health industry and also the aviation industry worldwide, but also particularly in America, and how the two different organizations or the two different fields view failure. So in the health industry, there is a total paralysis and fear around being sued if they make any mistakes. So he gives loads of different examples as to how, let's say there's an operation going on, a nurse says, can I just raise this because I think there's a mistake that might be about to be made in the operation. I think that his levels shouldn't be at that. We should do something about this. And the surgeon goes, you don't know what you're on about. I'm a surgeon. I've had all the training. You should just be quiet, basically. She gets silenced as a nurse, and the surgeon carries on. But it turns out she was right. It escalates. He does something to try and fix it, but by then it's too late, so he makes it worse. The patient then dies, and they meet with the family and say, I'm ever so sorry, but due to unforeseen circumstances, your loved one has died. And that happens all the time. And everyone covers everyone's back because everyone's made a mistake at some point. You wouldn't want to report what has gone on because there's a fear that, well, if I say something, I'm going to get blacklisted, or they might say what I did when this happened. By the way, I think that probably is a factor to do with the Lucy Letby thing in terms of fear of them reporting something. The systems aren't really there to do that, because if they had raised it with someone higher up, it's like, that really isn't helpful for you to have done that. I might need to report you for the thing that happened under your watch.
And I watched a drama called Dr. Death about a real doctor in America that was like intentionally harming and killing patients. And whenever anyone raised it, they were blacklisted, they were threatened, it went for years and years and years before finally, and he just moved hospitals.
Yeah. And that is able to happen in a system where we cannot cope with failure, where we can't cope with mistakes being made, and where they're not embraced as a normal, natural part of any process. The aviation industry is completely different. So there's two types of black box which are in an aeroplane. One of them records every electronic signal that is made. So imagine a pilot's thing with all those millions of little buttons, and you think, how can you know what all of them do? but every button that's pressed or every dial that's turned, that's recorded electronically on this thing as computer code, which is always retrievable, and they're impenetrable. They're like super hard boxes that you can, even if they're in a massive crash, you can find the black boxes and retrieve that information. So that's one box is the electronic one, and then the other box, it records all the audio communication that goes on in the plane and also to the ground and the ground back to the plane. So, saying, we want to land right now, or this, we seem to have a problem, we're just registering that and it's now resolved, and all of that's recorded and kept so that if there is an accident, they can go back over that and identify how that has happened. But the crucial bit of information that goes alongside this is any pilot has a 10-day window within which to do a full report of any incident that happens at all. So it doesn't necessarily need to lead to an accident like a plane crash. It might be just the levels went down, or the plane dipped for a bit and they can't quite work out why, and then they resolve it. And so the passengers might never realise there was any issue, but they knew there was a problem there. And any incident that happened, they have a 10-day window within which to write a full report of everything that happened. And if they do that, they're completely exonerated of any wrongdoing. They're not going to get prosecuted because they've built into the system. Things are going to go wrong, and it's not going to be something malicious. It'll just be that they misunderstood something or whatever. So they can write it down and go, the reason why that's happened is because in the handbook where it explains how to do it, that particular thing is worded in a weird way. So then they go, what do we now need to change as a result so that we can fix that and stop it from happening in the future? And as a result of that, the amount of deaths that have happened in the aviation industry are microscopic when you compare them to how many people get on an aeroplane and fly somewhere every year. That is just millions of people doing that all over the world. And the number of people who die in an aeroplane on any kind of aircraft is absolutely tiny. I don't have the figures in front of me, but they're tiny, tiny, tiny. Whereas the number of people who die through mistakes in a hospital that could have been avoided if there was a culture of learning from mistakes, that is absolutely massive. There's so many times that human error leads to a fatality or a serious injury, a serious long-term condition or something like that. And it's just the attitude change of embracing the fact that failure is going to happen, and when it does, it's an opportunity to learn so that we can change things. And sports people are also the same thing. I saw a really good interview the other day with Brooks Koepka, who is a golfer, and
I knew you'd get golfing.
So he says golf is a game of continually failing. Almost all of the shots I hit, I'm trying to get them in the hole. Every time I would like it to go in the hole. It's just most of the time it doesn't happen, apart from the last putt where you put it into the hole and okay, that one goes in. But most of the time it doesn't go in. So that means I'm constantly living in a place of failure. So embracing the game of golf as I'm going to fail means that when I do fail big time and hit it in a lake or whatever, it's just another failure. So I don't beat myself up about it. I just embrace, well, it's another one, move on, and continue to try and get the ball in the hole.
Wow.
But I think sports psychology works that way. It probably is true for us as well, embracing the fact every day you're going to make a bunch of mistakes. So there's no point like beating yourself up about failing. It's just it's a route in, it's an opportunity to grow and to develop as a person.
Yeah. And so in a minute, we're going to be talking in our small groups about how we want to respond to this. And it's a place where we can be quite open with things, maybe thinking about our personal lives, maybe thinking about if we're parents, the way we parent, if we work, what influence we might have in our workplace, or if we're students, what place we have with our housemates, with our course mates, all those places where we might be able to just change culture a little bit. For me personally, doing this series has really made me think about the way I parent, because obviously our kids fail all the time because we fail all the time. But even just yesterday, our 12-year-old Morgan was on a day off school. It was a training day, and I went out. I was a working day for me. Luke was out. I went out, came back. Morgan was here with 3 friends, making a total mess of the living room, playing on games, and then they all came in here and raided our fridge and ate all our food. And all of that is okay, but Morgan hadn't he hadn't asked if he could do that.
He found a boundary, and he hardly ever finds a boundary to go over the line. But anyway, it was kind of one.
But it was just a bit of a surprise. But then later he came to me very upset because one of the friends, and it's a very new friend from school, had borrowed one of our Nintendo Switch games. Morgan had generously said that he could borrow it. And between leaving our house and the friend arriving home, the game had got lost. And the friend had phoned Morgan really upset and said, I just don't know where it is, and it must have just fallen out of his pocket. These games are like tiny and they haven't put it in a box or a bag or anything, just shoved it in his pocket. They're 12 years old, he'd lost it. So Morgan was really upset. The problem for us is we don't know if that's our other son's game. Morgan doesn't know who technically owns that game. But for me, when Morgan said, like, I could feel that internal response, exactly the same as when I was on that road in France going, ah! But I took a deep breath and just thought about some of this stuff we've been talking about. Some of the, even just the knowledge, of course, we all make mistakes. And instead of being very cross with Morgan, was able to say, it's okay. We can go and have a look for the game. Why don't we cycle and see if we can find it? But it's not the end of the world. And affirm him in his generosity and say, we just love that you're a generous boy. Probably the mistake here was not asking. If you'd have asked, can I have my friends round? I would have said yes, but I would have appreciated being asked. And if you'd have asked, can I lend this game to him? I either would have said, probably not because they're quite expensive, or let's put it in a box so that it's well looked after. Yeah. But 12-year-olds boys don't think that through. And yeah, I think it's just that being able to respond well to failure.
And to help him learn from that and know that he's not like condemned forever having made a mistake. I had one just earlier this morning in work talking about easily making mistakes and embracing that as a normal part of our life. Had a conversation with one of my team members in Fusion who had felt that he'd been missed out of a communication loop around some of the goals that we've set for the year that particularly relate to him, and he just wasn't really consulted about it beforehand. And that is totally a mistake. We've got a new system going on, we're just working. We're getting used to that new team structure and everything, and so it was a mistake. It was an error to have missed him out of that loop. But he raised it so well that it made it probably easier for me to be like, well, you're absolutely right, and I'm really sorry about that. That's a mistake. There isn't a lot else I can say other than sorry about that. I'm really glad you're now in the loop, and we'll make sure that we do that now in future. But also, thanks for embracing the fact that we're bound to have a few things like this, there's teething problems and stuff like that. But that's it's every working day. I think there's an opportunity to go, yeah, that is probably, I'm really sorry, that isn't quite as it could have been, or it's a massive error and I'm really sorry. And but being able to say sorry, being able to say that's okay, I forgive you, or I move on, it's not a problem. That's a huge skill set to develop, I think.
Yeah.
And probably being able to forgive yourself is probably one of the hardest things that people find, isn't it? So if someone else apologises well, we might be able to forgive them and move on. A lot of people struggle to forgive themselves.
Yeah, definitely. That's definitely me. So over to you in your groups. Why don't you chat about this? How do you respond to failure? How would you like to respond to failure? Is there some stuff that you want to work on? Hopefully you know people well in your group, and I just really encourage you to be honest and open here. You might find it better to break up into slightly smaller groups if there's quite a lot of you tonight, but just share a bit about your journey with failure and how you would like to respond to it.